You're rocking with the best.
Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation, folks. Happy Tuesday. We got a lot to talk about. First, let me give you the latest about former President Donald Trump, how he continues to hold the lead to be the Republicans' nominee. And there's some new numbers that have come out to show that he holds the lead while Ron DeSantis dips. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Also, we're going to have a conversation about the end of student loan forgiveness. We're going to be checking in with Mr. Brian Walsh of SoFi Bank to give us the latest around that. Later on, we're going to check in with our sister and our resident doctor, Dr. Bridget. She's going to have today's edition of Reclaim Your Wellness. She's going to talk about how the U.S. Health Agency has officially recommended a new category for cannabis. What does that mean? How does that affect the landscape of where we are about the conversation around cannabis, legalizing the plant, and so much more? So folks, get ready to join us in the chat. We're streaming live on many platforms, but jump on the chat on our YouTube platform under Roland Martin and be a Culture Crew member for today. And let's go. It's the culture right here on the Black Star Network. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation today. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. Let me just check in with my culture crew here before we jump into the conversations. And folks, you can do the same thing as we're streaming live on many different platforms. We're streaming live, of course, on our home platform, our home website at blackstarnetwork.com, blackstarnetwork.com. Did I say it? Did I tell you the website? Oh, it's blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure y'all download the app for free and follow us on social media under Black Star Network. But most importantly, tune into all of today's show and all of the other dope programming we have here on the network. And that's, again, on blackstarnetwork.com. We're also streaming live on Amazon News on your Fire TV. So you can just let Alexa know, Alexa, pull up Black Star Network, and boom, you got us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right there on Amazon News. And you can find us on Plex TV, 24 hours, 7 days a week, as we're streaming live now there as well. So just search for Black Star Network or find us under Live TV, under News and Opinions, and you will definitely be able to find us. Now, we're also streaming on our Facebook page under Roland Martin, and we're streaming under Roland Martin's YouTube page, and that's where you can join the chat, folks, and be a part of the official culture crew, and you can join us in the conversation, sharing your thoughts, posing your questions, and so much more importantly, connecting with folks on a very real level. And of course, we're one of the very, very, very few spaces that you are a part of the conversation. So we invite you to check us out there as well. Big shout out to my online culture crew. Folks are already in there. Lori, I see you. Good afternoon, Lori. Thank you so much for checking in, and it's good to connect with you. Damon Blissett, my pastor, Pastor Damon Blissett. Peace and blessings, Brother Damon. You say, hey, kings and queens. Cindy D. Cindy. Thank you so much for checking in. We got Lisa Crowder 6, who's checking in as well. Welcome to the culture here, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us on the culture as part of the culture crew. Deidre Hall, we'd love to connect with you. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. JS is checking in. JS, thank you so much. John Israel, John, thank you so much. Pauline, Miss Pauline, good to connect with you. So look at Clinetta Potts, helping. Oh, Clinetta, good afternoon. Good to connect with you. Thank you so much. We got Betty Anderson that's checking in as well. D Watch is also in the chat. Mr. David Northern. Yeah, well, you know what, David, why don't you stick around and see if those conversations are truly racist, as you say. But thank you so much for checking in. And we got so many other folks. Anastasia, my sister, thank you. Peace and love to you too, Anastasia. And we want to say a big shout out to Lee Ann Young, who has donated at the top of the show, folks, to be a part of the Bring the Funk fan club, level 1. There we go. So, Leanne, thank you so much. Absolutely. So thank you so much, Leanne, for your support. And folks, you can continue to support us at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, folks, let me jump in here and let's talk a little bit about the latest around former President Donald Trump. As we know, he did not make the first Republican debate that was held for the top tier 8 candidates. Of course, we know Ron DeSantis was a part of that group, but it was also at that debate that Mr. Vivek Ramaswamy had his breakout appearance among the GOP candidates. And it looks like this may still be the residual effect of what happened at that debate, because many people said that Ron DeSantis really didn't come out as strong as he should have to really differentiate himself from the other candidates, and most importantly, to show that he is an heir, quote unquote, to dethroning Mr. Donald Trump. So here's the latest around this as President Trump, former President Donald Trump, continues to hold the lead, folks. And guess what? Ron DeSantis' numbers actually has gone down as a result of the past few days. Take a look at this. This is coming from CNN. I want to share with you just some of the numbers that they have around the situation. They said, according to this, now this is crazy, Trump is still the top choice for his party's nomination at the traditional Labor Day start to a more engaged campaign season, ahead of his nearest rival by more than 30 percentage points. 52% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independent voters support Trump, compared with 18% behind Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. And Trump is broadly seen as best able to handle a wide range of issues. More than 4 in 10 of the potential GOP primary electorate say they have definitely decided to support Trump for the nomination. 43% are definite Trump backers. 20% are firmly behind another candidate, and 37% have no choice or say they could change their minds. Now, nearly two-thirds consider him one of their top choices, and 61% say they think Trump is extremely or very likely to become the party's nominee, up from 52% at the start of the summer. Most feel the criminal charges, here's the kicker, folks, take a look. Most feel the criminal charges Trump faces are not relevant to his ability to serve as president, and a majority of GOP-aligned voters are not seriously concerned about the impact the charges could have on Trump's electability. Folks, I cannot make this stuff up. No writer can make it. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is real life, folks. Can you hear that? Y'all. Trump faces, most feel the criminal charges Trump faces are not relevant to his ability to serve as president. Even though some of the criminal charges are about the fact that he tried to undermine the 2020 election. I want y'all to just let that marinate for a minute. He tried to undermine the 2020 election, stop the official count of the vote on January the 6th. He done all of these things. He made the calls down to the state of Georgia. He did all of these things to interfere and to disrupt a federal election, and people are still behind him saying that they do not feel that his criminal charges are relevant to his ability to serve as president, and that a majority of GOP-aligned voters are not seriously concerned about the impact the charges could have on his electability. Whew. Crew. Y'all tell me. Y'all talk to me here. Talk to me, crew. What do you make of this as we talk about, as we are engaged in this campaign season? Can you believe this? Do you believe this? And what does this say about the state of affairs and the state of politics in this country, where a man who has been indicted on very serious charges, election interference for the state. Let's talk about the fact that he held classified documents way longer than he's supposed to, with some real questions about whether some of the documents, he truly returned all of the documents and who he shared those documents with. Then let's talk about his connection to the January 6th situation, that situation that played out. And yet, folks are saying that he's the best to handle the issues. He's the best candidate for the GOP party. He's the best man for the job to be the president of the United States of America. Tiana, you checked in. Good to hear from you. Tiana, my sister, you said those people do not care about charges. Trump is the new Jim Jones, and this will be the demise of this country. Jim Jones, of course, the cult leader. And it's interesting because I actually read a very fascinating article over the weekend about Trump, and more importantly, about cults. And it was one of the things that they said, because the writer had, and I'm trying to remember whether this is, I think this is for The Atlantic. And the writer had talked to folks who were involved in cults, various cults across the country and around the world, folks who were involved in cults and who have gotten out and how they had to be deprogrammed. And they talked about their life, and now they're advocating for us to not even get involved in those type of things, but more importantly, looking at the similarities of cults to what we see with this fellowship, this fellowship that comes from President Trump. And they make the connection and say it's very similar, that sometimes when you're involved in these cults, these things called truth, facts, all of this stuff kind of goes out the window. It becomes this very, very deeply emotional attachment. It's like a bad relationship. This deeply emotional attachment to these leaders, to the point of, you lose yourself, and that you start to become someone other than who you thought, like critical. And this is, and I'm not saying this to throw shade, but this is part of what the article is saying. This is what former cult members were saying, that you lose a sense of critical thinking. that you become so enmeshed into the culture, into this following, that you close people out, your family, your friends, you close people out about the perspectives that you should have. And it's a very, very fascinating stuff, right? It's a very, very fascinating stuff. And I think that what we're seeing with the power of like a Donald Trump, and just in this current cultural space, political and cultural space that we're in, we know that there is mass polarization in this country when it comes to ideas, when it comes to, we align ourselves to people, to causes, to ideas that affirm how we think, affirm who we think we are, how we see ourselves, and how we see other people. And the problem is that's not good for democracy, quote unquote, right? The problem is that if you just stick on your side and I stick on my side, where democracy is about the people, for the people, by the people, for the best interest of the people, then how do you have a conversation? How do you compromise? How do you try to think about your neighbor, think about your school, the teachers in the school? How do you think about other people outside of yourself? So being a part of this cult, this is what some folks are saying about this level of fellowship about for the former president, that it becomes this dangerous thing. And we're going to certainly talk much more about this, folks. Let me see who else has made some points. D-Watch, you said right on, totally absurd that a person can be under indictment for interfering in an election and still engage in a new election. There ought to be a law. D-Watch, I couldn't agree with you more, sir. Thank you. There ought to be a law. And I know the Constitution doesn't get into the details of that, but the Constitution, I don't think the founders figured that one day down the road, 200 and plus years, 250 plus years, well, less than 250 years into this thing, that the system, the American people, would be challenged by an individual who has come to prominence in the way that Donald Trump has come to prominence, and has been able to regain and take total control of his political party, to the point that he becomes the guy. Can I just say that he becomes the guy? Rodney Theoc, you said this country is so far gone. Shaking my head. Tiana, you said it's gotten so crazy, people ignore the truth. And that's going to be the demise, folks. When we stop listening to truth, when we stop adhering to what is right and moving into a space of personality instead of principle, then we're setting ourselves up to be destroyed. We are setting ourselves up. And I'm not saying the Democrats are perfect either. I'm just saying this is a lesson for all, for both Republicans and Democrats, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, regardless of your background. If we get into a space like this, this country is not going to be able to withstand itself. Will we see America in the next 50 years? Hell, let's not talk about the next 250 years. Next 50 years. That when your children grow up, when your grandchildren get to a certain age, where will this country be? If this is the precedent, that we can allow certain people who have criminal backgrounds, people who have shown that they really don't care about the law, people who have shown that they really don't care about the interests of the people who have shown that they really don't care about serving the American people, then what are we opening ourselves up to? This is bigger than politics. This is a very, very serious problem, because going back to your point, Tiana, folks don't want to accept the truth. And if we get to that point where we all become delusional, I need to pack me a bag. I need to pack a bag very quickly. Deidre, you said, I can't believe that Black folks are supporting this fool. Thank you, Deidre. Mary Davis, you said, how is Trump even able to run? Make it make sense. Donna McAdoo Kelly checking in from Facebook. You saying, but he'll have to answer to my God. This is very serious. Very, very serious. And so as we see this, and of course, we're going to keep you up to date on everything around the election and what's happening on the GOP side and, of course, on the Democratic side. But more importantly, I'm trying to get past all the labels. I'm trying to get past all the political division. I'm talking about the fact that we are at this point as the American people, as Black folks, as white folks, we are at this point in this country where we don't adhere to truth and facts. We don't adhere to principles anymore. We don't have a sense of morality. Our value system is in disarray. That's the part that I'm trying to get to. Because once that starts to fall, and it's falling, then we're going to be headed for something else. Folks, I got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to switch gears. Let's check in with Mr. Brian Welsh from SoFi Bank to talk to us about the end of student debt forgiveness. We'll have that conversation up next. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punching!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. We are streaming live right now on YouTube and Facebook. You can find us on our YouTube page under Roland Martin and on our Facebook page under Roland Martin. We would love to connect with you as we have today's conversation. So, all right, let's talk a little bit about what's happening with the student debt forgiveness process, programs, and where we are with that. So I'm going to check in with Mr. Brian Welsh, who serves as the manager of financial planning for SoFi Bank, to give us the latest on this situation that was once the hot topic, but it seems to die down But trust me, folks, you don't want to miss a word of this part of the conversation. So, Brian, welcome to the culture again. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again.
Brian, talk to us about this latest of the student debt piece. I mean, again, this was a national conversation. There was a lot of discussion about how the Biden-Harris administration was going to move forward on this. They attempted to try to forgive the debt of millions of Americans. The Supreme Court stopped that. The president and his administration responded in kind, saying, "Look, we're going to find another way to make this thing happen to keep his campaign promise fulfilled." Where are we with this whole situation, Brian?
Yeah, I think the two big things to keep in mind right now is there's what's going on and what's going to start up over the course of the next month. And then there's some long-term possibilities as well. So you're spot on with when the Supreme Court ruled against the plan to forgive $10,000 or $20,000 for people, depending on if they received the Pell Grant. They ruled against that. The Biden administration came out and basically put out 3 different actions. They said, number one, we're going to go down an alternate path to see if we can get forgiveness another way. Number two, they launched a new program for income-driven repayment to ideally make loan payments more affordable, depending on your income level and your loan balances, things like that. And then number three, they're like, hey, we're going to have a 1-year on-ramp period where we're going to reduce some of the negative effects to your credit or getting sent to collections if you absolutely can't make your payments. So there's some things that they responded with. But important to keep in mind, interest has started back up as of Friday on federal student loans, and payment is going to be required in October at some point.
Wow. So do you think the American people, are folks ready for this? I mean, I know that there are still millions of Americans that are still recovering from what COVID has done. Millions of Americans are now dealing with new economic challenges, whether it's not just rising food costs. I was just reading a piece in various publications, Brian, about rent costs. More rent costs is huge in America right now. There is some statewide and national conversations about rent control. So are folks prepared to take on this new debt from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there's going to be some people who, quite frankly, are going to be in a very, very tough spot making these payments again. But then there's going to be a lot of people who can make these payments and can move towards the path of getting out of debt. That's why it's so important to understand what your options are and understand what your focus should be on your student loans. Because, you eventually want to get your student loans paid off, but sometimes you got to prioritize what you're paying right now. And if you're having trouble fitting your student loan payments into your budget, there's some good options out there. Number one, you could go extended repayment where you stretch out the payments over 20, 30 years. You could use the new income-driven repayment plan, the SAVE plan that was announced earlier this summer, or even some people are looking to refinance to fit their student loan payments in their budget. And then other groups of people, if they have room in their budget, then they're able to make extra payments and ultimately get out of debt faster.
Talk to us a little bit about this petition. On August 28th, the Debt Collective created a student debt release tool, which seeks to call on the Department of Education to cancel all student loan debt through the Higher Education Act of 1965. They said on their website, this is the first of its kind petition generates an individual appeal to the Department of Education requesting that they exercise that power for you now. This brand new tool creates a legal memo requesting that the Department of Education cancels your federal student loans, invoking its authority to compromise, settle, waive, or release all federal student debt. What is this all about, Brian, this student debt release tool? And how can people take advantage of it? Is this a good thing?
Yeah, so right now, looking at, you mentioned the Higher Education Act, and that's mentioned in that release. So the Higher Education Act is what the Biden administration and the Department of Education, they're going down that alternate path to student loan forgiveness. That's the act that they're looking to use now. So not to get too nerdy about all this, because I know most people probably aren't as into the weeds on student loans as me, but the initial plan for forgiveness used the HEROES Act, and that's what the Supreme Court ruled against. Going down the Higher Education Act, number one, that's a longer, more intense process for the government to go through. Number two, no one really knows what's going to happen if there's another forgiveness plan using the Higher Education Act. Is it going to be challenged in the courts? If it does get challenged in the courts, what's the Supreme Court going to decide if it eventually gets there? So there's a ton of unknowns there on that process for forgiveness. At the end of the day, we're working with people saying what we know right now is payments are starting back up in October. Interest already started. So let's figure out the best plan of attack right now, because forgiveness is a huge unknown, especially considering, there was a lot of, I guess, momentum moving towards forgiveness coming out of the pandemic, and it still didn't happen, and it still got struck down. So I think that's where it becomes a big unknown.
Oh, absolutely. Look, we're going to take another quick pause. When we come forward, Brian, I want to kind of get your take on, the Biden administration's handling of this situation. And do you think he kind of spoke too soon to say that he can make this thing happen? So I want to get your take on that, because I think that certainly has elevated the sense of hope that people are going to get some sort of relief from the government. So we'll continue the conversation on the other side. Crew members, jump into the discussion as we check in with Mr. Brian Walsh, Manager of Financial Planning from SoFi Bank. Let's talk a little bit more about student loan debt forgiveness. What's your take? What are your questions? And let's continue the conversation on the other side, right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. We have been checking in with Mr. Brian Welsh, manager of financial planning for SoFi Bank, to talk to us about the end of student debt forgiveness. And Brian, I want to bring you back into the frame as we talk about this, because this is still a big issue. It's just announced, of course, that the Biden administration's that created a new student loan payment plan called SAVE, called Saving an Invaluable Education Plan. It could lower monthly repayments for about 20 million borrowers. And it debuted with a beta rollout and was ready for all applicants in mid-August. It has enrolled 4 million people in 2 weeks since it launched in late July, Brian. That's a lot of people that jumped in on a website that's not for concert tickets. So what does that say for folks like yourself, for folks in the financial planning industry, the economics industry? What does this say that on how the president is holding? Is this a good idea? Is the president making a good move considering that historic Supreme Court decision? And what does that say to have so many people enrolling in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I think it could be good, it could be bad. And what I mean by that is I think it's an extremely valuable program for people who are in a very, very tough spot, who need to focus on reducing their payments. And let's face it, with really high inflation, with high interest rates, with extremely tough affordability issues with housing, there are a good chunk of people who are stretched financially. So with the SAVE plan, it's going to be the most generous income-driven repayment option that's available to student borrowers. So it's really going to help people who need that help. On the flip side, when it comes to loans or debt in general, you're either going to pay now or you're going to pay over the long term. And sometimes when you, in exchange with that lower monthly payment now, you may end up paying much more back over the life of the loan. So rather than just opting, hey, cheapest payment, that's what I'm going to go with no matter what, figure out if it's actually going to be best for you, because you may end up making those payments for 10, 20, 25 years. And that can add up to a lot of money, especially if your income increases. So if you use it the right way, the way it's designed to be used, it can be a lifeline. If you just opt into it out of default, it could cause some challenges down the road.
I can imagine it. I can imagine it. Brian, help me to understand something on this, man. Why, when we have a situation like this, right, a crisis, generational crisis, because student debt can carry, like you said, for 20, 25 years. It can really impede upon a person's ability to do everything from renting an apartment to getting a home. The things that our country and our culture often advocates as being kind of like progressive moves of upward mobility. Mm-hmm. How come we don't go after the banks? And I know you work for one.
That's my job. I'm kidding.
But I'm just asking, like, how come we're not having conversations with the bank about this whole process? Because it's not as if the banks don't know the economics of the American people. So how come the banks aren't at the table, or at least there's some very serious, legitimate conversation, whether the president is doing this or whether some other agency is doing this, the Department of Education? How come the banks are not like, you know what, let's try to figure this out? How come the schools aren't a part of the conversation on a very fundamental level, where we're saying, this is just too much. Like, this is a huge burden for a lot of people. This country can't move forward if we continue to just burden people like that. Like, how come we're not bringing institutions in it and just leaving it down to the president, to Congress, and to the American people?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is a very challenging system. And like for me, my parents didn't go to college, so I went to college. I was learning as I went. Same thing with my siblings. So like this issue is personal to me, just because I took out a ton of student loans. I ended up paying them back. You know, at the end of the day, I can't control what politicians, what institutions, anything like that do. But what I do see that's good now is I think more families are paying attention to the cost of education and the return they're getting on that investment. And if enough people do that and they make the right decisions for their families, then that'll create change at a broader scale.
But isn't there a concern though, Brian? But isn't there a real concern that if this thing continues to spiral out of control, that first time, I know that I was the first one in my family to graduate from college, right? But doesn't it like cause people to no longer want to go to college because they know if I go to college, I'm gonna have to incur this debt, and if I incur this debt, then it's like a domino effect. So isn't it like working against the very thing that we want students to do, or we want people to do? We want people to go to college. We want to become more educated. We want more working professionals, but this money problem is a very serious roadblock to all of that.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge here is, yes, I think we want people to go to college. We want people to be educated as a society, but we kind of put it on the individual of saying how much is too much to borrow. Because if you look at how federal student loans work, which federal student loans are a majority of the student loans, out there, that's fantastic. It opens up an opportunity for people to get an education. But I was a finance major as an undergraduate. My wife was an education major. She was able to borrow the same amount of money as I was going through it, regardless of the difference in the earning potential between the two different majors. So if we borrow the same amount of money, in theory, I'm gonna have a much easier job paying that back than she would. And I guess ignoring the fact of different professions and how we reward that and all that stuff. So I think it's on the families to say, okay, here's what major I'm looking at. If it's gonna be a lower earning major, let's cut costs as much as we can. Let's go 2-year, then to 4-year. If it's a higher earning major, you have less flexibility. And do I count on institutions to make that change? No, probably not. In your earlier segment, you're talking about the politics of this country in general. But I think enough families can make that decision, and it'll help them, and it can help change things if enough people make that decision for themselves.
All right, let me take a couple of comments from my culture crew here as folks are checking in. Let me see. We got JR Shield from our YouTube page. JR, you said if the people don't get help from the options that exist, they will seek someone like Trump, who appears their best chance. Why is this so confusing? Why is this so confusing? There seems to be some options. The president, of course, is coming out with a program, but you work in financial planning. There are some options on the table, but it still seems like those options and those ideas are not getting to students and to their families. What's the roadblock here for you that you face, Brian?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just understanding the options and then taking a step back and analyzing your finances. Because you think about it, financial literacy isn't something that most people are taught. Like in high school, they're stuck learning it from their parents, and a lot of people don't even learn it from their parents. So they don't have any sort of financial education when they're in high school. And then it's like, okay, now we have an opportunity to take on tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loans without really knowing the ins and the outs. I think education is the only way to change that. That's why we launched a course on Coursera. I've taught at the college level. Like, I love teaching young people about personal finances, because it's one of those things that if you don't learn it early on, then once you learn it, let's say in your late 20s, 30s, 40s, you're digging yourself out of a hole. So I think that's a fundamental flaw in our education system and in society in general, is just not teaching people the basics about finances.
And you know what? I think that needs to change, Brian. I think you would agree with me that we should have financial literacy as early as elementary school, to get young people, to get children and young people at least thinking about proper ways to handle money. And I know this is a very broad question I'm gonna ask, but I think you can handle it. The fact that we are in a capitalistic society, is that helping or hurting this part of the conversation as it relates to the finances of the American people?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're just looking at capitalism, then the free market would be able to control and underwrite loans and things like that. But the government doesn't do underwriting for federal student loans. So they don't look and say, okay, Brian's gonna be this major, so he could take on this amount of debt. Mallory's gonna be this major, she could take on that type of debt. But there's some part of society where I guess you view it as valuable. So you're like, okay, we don't want that. We want people to be able to take on the debt. So really the only way to make that available to people while protecting them would be the education piece. And would be forcing these tough conversations with people so they can really weigh these trade-offs. Because I don't think a pure approach of, hey, Brian has to qualify for any student loans, otherwise not going to college, versus Brian gets anything he wants. I think those extreme views in anything in life typically aren't the right views. I think it's somewhere in the middle where we kind of find that common ground where we're all like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, whether it be student loans or darn near anything else in the world, finding common ground is something that's relatively rare these days.
Absolutely. So I know we got a few moments left, but I want to get your take because a lot of the student debt conversation has made a huge impact on Black students, other minority groups. Talk to us about how should Black families, minority families in this country should handle this situation?
Yeah, I think it's really critical as you start looking at schools, thinking about it from a return on education perspective. Because at the end of the day, going to school is going to be an investment. And it can either be a good investment or it could be a bad investment or somewhere in between. So think about what you're looking to major in, looking up what the average earnings are for that major, and then understand based on that, how much can I afford to take on? And then you'll be able to see, okay, here's how much I can borrow. That may mean going to a 2-year school than a 4-year school. It may mean going to a private school because they have better financial aid packages, whatever it may be, but it has to be looked at really as an investment, not just something that, okay, we're going to do it because I know I should do it or I think I should do it, and figuring out the right path for you.
Laura, you checked in. You said those who like to eat restaurant food every single day, cook at home, will be extra money that you can help pay on your loan. It's cheaper to cook at home, cook enough that will last you for a few days. You also said, Lori, go to food pantries, go to many as you can. Most definitely, it will cut your grocery money spending in half, more extra money to pay on your loan. Stop buying Starbucks. Don't come for my neck like that, Lori. Make it home, buy a thermos. Here's the thing, and I love Lori's ideas. Lori, you know, I love your ideas, but my thinking is most adults have more than just one bill. We have tons of bills, right? So when we have to readjust our whole existence, the way we live our lives for a bill, it just seems kind of crazy. You know, you got to live your life. Like, you know, you get to a job, first you graduate from school, so there's a slight brief moment of celebration, and then reality starts to hit that you got to go out into the world, you got to fend for yourself and all of that stuff. And then now you have to readjust your life for a bill. Talk to us a little bit about, Brian, the mental changes, the shift in thinking that's required like this. Because I like Lori's point, but then it's like the discipline that's required to make you feel like, you know what, I can't get a Starbucks coffee. I can't go out this weekend because I got to pay my student loan debt. And it's like, it becomes this other thing outside of just paying the bill. Bills are going to be a part of life. That's not the issue. But this is like, if you're living your life you're living to pay a bill, it's a little bit different. That's a little bit different, approach. Talk to me about the mental shift that we're going to have to make in order to really kind of get through this process.
Yeah, two things come to mind when I hear that. Number one, I think people in general pay too much attention to the little things and not enough attention to the big things. I read online all the time about, okay, the Starbucks, the going out to eat, those things. And you're right. If you do it enough, it's really, really going to add up. But by and large, people's biggest expenses are where they live and how they get around. And that's where we focus a lot of our conversation would be on the housing and the transportation expenses, especially right now, because changes there can have a really, really big impact compared to a coffee habit, eating habit, whatever that may be. The second piece would be, I think it does require discipline in order to have your finances in a right spot. But more so, I think it's about creating a system. There's so many things you can automate now through technology where you can just develop a system that just allows you to go on autopilot and do the things you know you should be doing without forcing yourself to make that decision every single time. Like, I'll use an example. Myself, I buy silly things that I don't need on Amazon. Like I'm a financial planner. This is what I do for a living, and I cannot help myself. So after multiple attempts, I'm like, this is where I splurge. I just took the app off my phone, and my wife still has it on her phone. So if I really need something, I ask her. And if it's something that is silly, I won't ask her because I'll be embarrassed. So it's trying to figure out how you can put those systems in place to kind of protect yourself from yourself.
Wow. You got a real Amazon buying problem, Brian?
You know, you go on there for one thing, and then you start seeing all the other stuff, and you're like, okay, I really
that's me at Target. You get your latte. You get your latte, Lori. Next thing you know, you buy $200 worth of stuff that you like. I don't know what just happened. I went into a black hole, and the retail black hole. No, I see. So you're saying that one way is to create a system, not worry about curbing your behavior. It's like create a system, and that's the best way. Okay, yeah, I appreciate
it. Once you establish a system, you essentially have the discipline in place, so that way you have the freedom to live your life. And if you know, here's how much I need to be spending, and you automate almost everything, or if you know, here are my triggers for overspending, avoid it. Put restrictions in place. Then it allows you to live your life in other places without stressing nonstop.
There it is. Hey, Brian, I always appreciate you for giving us some very, very helpful advice and some insight around the situation. Where do people get more resources? What would you recommend for some of the places that folks can get some resources around student debt forgiveness, financial planning? Talk to me.
Yeah, so you can go to SoFi.com or download the SoFi app. We have articles, videos, webinars, complimentary access to financial planners. We also built a 5-course personal finance curriculum on Coursera. You can take the course for free. If you want a certificate, I think you have to pay for it or whatever. But to the earlier conversation, learn about finances is really important. So either of those options could be very useful.
There it is. Brian Welch, Manager of Financial Planning for SoFi Banks. Brian, thank you so much for being on the show again, and look forward to having you back on to continue this conversation, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's shift our thinking to talking about our health and wellness. We're going to be checking in with Dr. Bridget. I know today is not Monday, but I had to bring Dr. Bridget on to talk about something big that is happening within the cannabis industry. So we'll talk to her to get the latest on that and so much more. Join us in the conversation. We're streaming live right now on YouTube, on the Roland Martin, and on our Facebook page. And you can be a part of the culture crew today. So join us in the conversation right now. Folks, stay with us. It's The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture. Weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation, folks. If you missed the first hour, make sure you do your due diligence, be a part of Team Replay, and check out the first hours. We talked a little bit about the latest in the upcoming presidential election on the GOP side, as President Trump is still holding the lead and looks to be the nominee for the party. We talked a little bit about that, and we talked about student debt forgiveness as we checked in with Mr. Brian Walsh of SoFi Bank. So make sure y'all do your due diligence. Check us out on the first hour of the show. Be a part of Team Replay, and then also while you're online, make sure that you download the app for free of Black Star Network. Download it on all your devices and follow us on social media. And we are streaming right now on Black Star Network. We're streaming right now on Amazon News and your Fire TV. We're streaming on Plex TV 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're also streaming right now on Facebook. And we are on the YouTube page for Brother Roland Martin. We are streaming there, and it's on our YouTube page where you can join us in the chat, folks. That's right. You could join us in the chat, be a part of the culture crew for the day, as folks have been having a lot of conversations from everything from student loan debts, financial planning, and Trump. The conversation is always on fire in the culture crew chat. So make sure that you share your thoughts on that. All right, folks, it's Tuesday, but the news that we got about the cannabis industry, I couldn't wait till next week to have this conversation. So I invited our resident doctor, Dr. Bridget Cole Williams, to join us in the conversation. So on today's edition of Reclaim Your Wellness, let's talk about how there's a new, how the latest U.S. health agency has recommended that cannabis is put into a different category. Let's get into the segment. Good afternoon, Doc. How are you?
Great. How are you, Farajii?
I'm good. I'm so happy that you're able to join us today on Tuesday, because I was like looking at this story and I was like, oh yeah, we can't wait. We can't wait. First thing, we need to see you every week. So I don't care if we're not on until Friday. We bringing Dr. Bridget on per week.
Well, it's good to be seen. Always good to be seen.
Talk to us a little bit about this new announcement that is coming from, what is this? This is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Mm-hmm. How they're saying that marijuana should no longer be classified in the same category as drugs like heroin and LSD. This is big, Doc.
It's a very big deal. You know, I like to say times are changing. We'll see how this actually works out. But yes, the Department of Health and Human Services is formally recommending that the Drug Enforcement Administration eases the government restrictions on cannabis. So currently right now, cannabis is considered a Scheduled I medication. So controlled substances have been put into 5 categories back in 1970 with Nixon, so that we had a better understanding of what drugs had medical opportunities, what drugs were more addictive, what drugs had more abuse potential, so that we knew how to act accordingly. So back in 1970, they put cannabis in a Scheduled 1, means that it is the most dangerous and the most abusive set of drugs that are out there, with no medicinal qualities whatsoever. And it was never meant to stay there. The idea is that there was going to be some more research around it and that it would be moved to a different category over time. But for whether it was political issues or for negligence and ignorance, it was never moved down, right? And so now what they're suggesting is that it is moved into a category 3. Category 3 means moderate abuse potential and moderate ability or chance of addiction with some medicinal use. So it's definitely an improvement. Do I think it should be even in Schedule 3? I think it probably could be moved down even a little bit further, but this is definitely something that's needed. And, you know, Biden brought this up 11 months ago. Nothing really moved on it. And I don't think it's any coincidence that it's now being discussed right during political season.
But and I think to that point, cannabis was never, I mean, there are a lot of other hot button topics that are on the table that I think a lot of people are more concerned about than cannabis. So, I mean, to that point that you made, saying that it's political season, like, why now? Like, was there, as far as you know, was there a situation that may have happened to prompt this conversation, or is this just because it is political season?
Well, I think it depends on, where you sit with this. And the fact of the matter is, for some people, this is a huge, huge topic. Is cannabis people will vote for politicians that support cannabis legalization. And so if you are behind in the polls, if you have concerns about your likability, I think this is when people bring it up. There are a lot of topics that only seem to come up when it's time to grab more voters, whether it's Black voters, whether it's women, and in this case, they're looking for the cannabis vote.
Absolutely, absolutely. Jelly Bean M, you checked in and said there is no evidence of addiction. 0. Is that true, Doc?
So I would never say 0. The fact of the matter is that addiction is a relative experience. So for some people, they're addicted to shopping. Some people are addicted to food. Some people are addicted to gambling. There is definitely an abuse and addictive quality to cannabis, but it is extremely low. Cigarettes, obviously cocaine, heroin, all are much, much higher. We used to say that addictive properties were about maybe 7 or 9%, around the same level of caffeine. So, we know there are those people that drink a pot of coffee a day, right? But honestly, as the more states have legalized cannabis, we're seeing that number of abusive and addictive behavior actually moving up. So it is always a concern. I'm always very, very careful with my patients that are they using cannabis or is cannabis using them? Because I will be on the wrong side of history when it comes to this as a medication. But to say that there's no addictive quality, there's definitely abuse, and some people develop a bad relationship with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're going to take another quick pause, Doc, but when we come forward, I want us to talk about, even though the Department of Health and Human Services has formally made this recommendation, the decision still comes down to the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA. And there are major implications for this situation, that if cannabis is moved to a Schedule 3 category designation, that essentially this could open Pandora's box. And I remember you and I were talking about this earlier, and I mean, you were just like, man, this is going to be crazy market. This is going to just explode everything. So I want us to talk a little more details about that on the other side. Crew, join us in the conversation. We're checking in with Dr. Bridget Cole-Williams, MD, as we talk about this new designation that's being recommended by the U.S. the Department of Health and Human Services to move cannabis from a Schedule 1 drug to a Schedule 3 drug and the implications of that. What are your thoughts on this, crew? We'd love to hear from you. And of course, we'll take your comments as we get them from the other side. So stay with us. There's still a lot more to cover in this conversation right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
I'm Farajii Muhammad, live from LA. And this is The Culture. The Culture is a two-way conversation. You and me. We talk about the stories, politics, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. So join our community every day at 3 p.m. Eastern and let your voice be heard. Hey, we're all in this together. So let's talk about it and see what kind of trouble we can get into. It's The Culture, weekdays at 3, only on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We have been chatting with our resident physician and cannabis expert and author, Dr. Bridget Cole-Williams, about this new designation that is being formally recommended by the Department of Health and Human Services in making cannabis taking cannabis from a Schedule 1 category to a Schedule 3 category. Now, folks, if you have been keeping up to date on the conversation about the legalization of cannabis, you know that this recommendation could be the start of something very historic, in that it could start to have start the process of a national conversation about decriminalizing cannabis, which would means that states across the country would be allowed to would be more inclined to make laws to decriminalize cannabis use. Now that's one of the big things that I think could come from this recommendation, if it's followed by the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, that has the final say on where this drug and other, where cannabis and other drugs stand on the schedule. So we've been checking in with Dr. Bridget MD for Reclaim Your Wellness today. So this is like that little pebble in the stone, Doc, that has all of these ripples, right? Because if they shift this, if the DEA says yes, we see this, and I'm assuming that because the DEA, they are also into drug enforcement, law enforcement, that they would probably have to use a set of data to see if cannabis users are more criminals. You know what I mean? What kind of data support this? Give us as much as you know about this process. What would the DEA need to consider to make this final decision?
Well, they have to look at how has cannabis changed this country, right? They're looking at whether the abuse potential, they're looking at the addiction, they're looking at the medical use of it. And to be honest, we have 10,000 or more articles of research to show its medicinal use. So I really don't think that's the issue. I think this is not just a political issue, health, banking, business issue. Decriminalization, like 20 states right now have some level of decriminalization. And obviously, if this pushes ahead, that would push the needle as well. I think, to be honest, I think this is mainly a business issue. I think that if they want, they're looking at big businesses that currently cannot do any sort of tax write-offs whatsoever because of the fact of how it fits in as being a Scheduled I drug. And so if they are able to push this into being a Schedule III, then the tax burden that now hits state licensed cannabis operators would actually be lifted, and they would be able to do the write-offs that other big corporation businesses are able to do. It will actually save the cannabis industry hundreds of millions of dollars a year. So again, I come back to it being a political season, that this affects not just the small businesses greatly, but it definitely affects large businesses incredibly, right? And with that happening and it being a political season, I think there's a reason for this. Also, I think it's prepping the country for when pharmaceutical companies start rolling out their cannabis drugs in larger quantities, because we know Big Pharma is not going to pay the taxes that these cannabis businesses have been paying for the last decade.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're talking about millions of dollars in this situation.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't think
even
this
billions.
is about patients. I don't think this is about access to medication. I don't think they really care that much. I think the way it is fine as far as they're concerned. I think this, what runs this country is big business and big dollars. And I think that people like their political seats and will sell their souls to keep them. Right. And so I think this is where that we're pushing the needle. It's more about business and money than it is about the small guy and their storefront business whatsoever. Now, with it being a political issue, there is a divide. In Florida, DeSantis says that he's going to oppose this. Here, DeWine in Ohio says that even, it's supposed to be on our ballot here in November in Ohio, and he says he plans to veto it as well, because there's still that divide when it comes to how politicians look at this and who their voting supporters are. But the funny thing about cannabis is that, right side, left side, people do cannabis all across the board, black, white, whatever. So I'm curious about how this will land in the long run, but this is the line that they draw in the sand.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me, Lily, you checked in. Welcome to the crew, Lily. You said when a weed roach was illegal and now it's okay, all those cases should be excused. Now, let's talk a little bit about that, because you have a lot of cases, a lot of black men and a lot of black women that are in prison because of marijuana possession, marijuana use in the car, in the home, and all of those things. So if you change this designation from Schedule I to Schedule III, then what happens to those folks? What happens to those cases? And Lily, I appreciate you for bringing this up. So what happens at that point, Doc?
It's hard to say because, states have been decriminalizing this slowly but surely. Some of them have been looking at the people already in jail, and some of them have just said, well, this is what we'll do going forward. But you're right. One joint could get you in jail for a very long time in the past. Now they have to see some sign that you having a quantity that shows that you're trying to sell it. So larger quantities, and most of the time it's just a fine at this point. What I hope is that people that are in jail for non-violent crimes related to cannabis on any level should be let out at this point, because while they're sitting in jail, there are white boys and big corporations that are making a lot of money off of doing the same thing. So just to give you an example though, so we talked about Scheduled 1 is LSD, heroin, ecstasy, right? Scheduled 3 is Tylenol with codeine, anabolic steroids, testosterone, ketamine. So they're very different drugs that the categories as far as what they do and the effect that they have and whether they have medicinal use or not. The fact of the matter is cannabis was never supposed to be Scheduled 1 in the first place. And I don't really care if it's about business. I don't care if it's about politics. It's about just what's right. And the research and history alone says it is not a Scheduled 1 medication by any means, and that it needs to be in the category which can be most beneficial to the people that utilize it for recreational and medicinal use.
Right.
Like the push right now is to put it into the same realm and control the same way that we control alcohol.
So here's the other question then. And this might be real conspiracy theory. So you tell me if I'm wrong, if I'm thinking Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, where the United States government is actively involved in growing cannabis. If this works, if it's decided upon that they're going to switch the scheduling of it, that now the government is going to get involved in some level because of the financial benefits, because of the health benefits, because the control benefits for the government. Do you think that may happen?
Well, first of all, the government's been growing cannabis since the early 70s. They have cannabis farms in Kentucky, I believe mainly, and that's mainly due to a court case with Normal and Robert C. Randall, who was a glaucoma patient, and he fought to be able, there weren't and still aren't a lot of great options for glaucoma, and he fought that, saying this was actually the one medication that worked best for his condition, and so they've been growing cannabis. Back then, they were rolling joints and putting it in coffee cans and mailing it out to patients that fit into the category of the people that sued for this right. I believe the last person that was a part of that recently just died, maybe in just the last couple of years. So this has been going on. But to your point, that the government has a patent actually on CBD. And they've had it for quite some time. They're well aware of the medicinal benefits of it. So you can look up government patent CBD and you'll see that there's a patent on it and it's owned by the government. So there's no confusion about what this is. And there's no confusion about big businesses wanting to profit off of it. When pharmaceutical companies are ready and in large quantity, and of course they have so much control over our government and the FDA, things will change drastically. I think this is just step one.
And see, that's the other point about it. It's like what we saw with the COVID-19 vaccinations, that you're going to have these companies producing their own quote unquote vaccinations. Same thing I'm thinking that would happen within the cannabis industry, where you have the companies. It could be a Pfizer, it could be a Moderna, it could be another pharmaceutical tech company that says, "Oh, we're producing a cannabis brand. This is our brand."
So, you're in California. There's a drug called Yggdrasil. It is a tablet of cannabis grown from cannabis plants. It's not synthetic. At one point, I was able to look it up. There was a call to be an Yggdrasil physician, and I went back a week later, and I was blocked from the site. And I can only tell you what is true because I can't get to the site anymore. So you can look it up, see if you see anything. But what it said was that it was FDA approved and that it was covered by insurance. And I think this was a starting point for what would start to go across the country. We are blind if we don't see everything that we have created in this cannabis industry as a being the ground point for pharmaceuticals to come in and take it over. There's a reason why it's not covered by insurance greatly. There's a reason why it's not FDA approved. They act like they're too confused to know what to do with it. It's because the pharmaceutical companies are going to take this over. And then all of a sudden there'll be no confusion for the doctors, for the FDA, for the insurance. All of a sudden everything will be clear as a bell. But right now they act like they don't know what to do, so they do nothing at all. It's because of the pharmaceutical companies.
And what does that do to the quality? Does that, and I mean, because I know that I personally know some folks that grow it in their backyard, right? Mm-hmm. And they use, of course, this all natural. And these are Black folks, Doc. These are Black folks that's like, look, man, my stuff is all natural, comes from the earth, blah, blah, blah. So now if the government is starting to, like you say, take over the market and essentially become like the Walmart of cannabis,
right?
Then that's going to open the door for a lot of new conversations about trust. Mm-hmm. It's going to open the door about pricing. It's going to open the door about availability.
Right.
It's a lot that the American people will have to try to contend with.
You know, I'm curious what will happen with home grow, because in reality, you know, me growing tomatoes in my backyard does not put a dent into Dole or Del Monte or, you know, whoever's putting tomatoes in a can, correct?
Right.
Like it's not going to have that dent. But I'm still curious what effect that's going to have, because tomatoes don't have a black market. There's no illegal market for tomatoes. And so, you know, if the pharmaceutical companies take over, I don't know what's going to happen, because so many states have some level of home grow that is available. So I don't know what's going to happen with that specifically. I think it could go either way, that they don't think it's significant enough to matter, or they're going to really nail it down and limit that in some way. But the thing about growing cannabis is that it's not just about access. You know, people don't grow it just so that they can have it. There's an artist type creative energy. You know, people are proud of their plants. They put a lot of love into growing them. And so it's kind of like telling people, well, you can't garden. People garden to eat, but a lot of people garden because it's this joy they get out of, you know, planting a seed and taking care of it to grow and, you know, to be a healthy living, you know, plant. So, you know, I don't know how that's going to change. And when you talk about the quality, quality has a lot to do with the love that you put into a plant. We know this, and the lack of pesticides that you're putting into it as well. So it's hard to say how this will end up in the long run, because you assume people want to do right, but we have a long history of doing what makes money. And that's really what's going to always, you know, be the difference at the end of the day.
And I mean, again, not going conspiracy theorists, and we got to take another pause, but dealing with, because Black people have traditionally and historically been on the other end of experiments coming from the pharmaceutical industry, there should be some very major concerns about, you know, if you're getting your cannabis plant from your local government agency versus your natural, you know, homegrown producer,
right?
That there should be some very big concerns about that.
I mean,
and I'm just saying, based upon, Doc, as you know it and I know it, the history that Black folks have had with the government and with the healthcare industry of this country, we don't have a functional. It's not a good record.
No, it's not a good record. And to be honest, you know, we're funny people, because we don't like eating someone's potato salad at the reunion if it don't look right.
Don't put no raisins in a potato salad.
Right? Like if it don't look right, we aren't, you know, or if we know whose house we don't even touch it.
Right,
so,
right.
And that's who we are, and we're beautiful people, but we also have a lot of distrust for a lot of good reasons. And so, you know, I do think that there's an aspect of the Black community that will say, well, my doctor is recommending it now, it's covered by my insurance, and I really don't care. And there's also a large aspect of our community that will say, I'm getting it, from my aunt because I know how she grows it and I know what she's doing. And I know how she makes her edibles. And I'd rather have that than, like you said, getting it from the state store.
Absolutely. Look, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, more questions. Doc, people are checking in from around the country as we're talking about this. Truly appreciate your expertise on this, saying that you're speaking a lot of facts, and I'm like, of course you're speaking facts. He's been writing books on it. If you haven't read her book, and she has 2 volumes of Courage in Cannabis right now that's out and available, where she's talking about the industry, she's talking about the stories, and so much more around the cannabis industry. Courage in Cannabis Volume 1 and Volume 2 are now available. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, more with Dr. Bridget as we talk about this possible new designation of cannabis and marijuana. Join us in a conversation on our YouTube chat under Roland Martin, and we'll be right back with your comments. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about how the Department of Health and Human Services has provided a formal recommendation to the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, to possibly reschedule cannabis from a Schedule I drug to a Schedule III drug, which would change the conversation about marijuana in this country in a dramatic way. And we've been talking to Dr. Bridget, who is our resident physician, family doctor, but she's also a cannabis expert, and she serves as the author of Courage in Cannabis Volume 1 and Volume 2 as we talk about this issue. All right, so here's the other element of this too, Doc. Benny Hill checked in. He said, going to be more regulations for a black man to open a shop than a women's healthcare facility in Alabama. We got to stop that. Stop the rent seeking too. $250,000 for a license application in New York. And I'm assuming he's talking about to open up a dispensary. Mm-hmm. The cannabis industry has been presented to black folks, black entrepreneurs, as being like a saving grace in some way. Mm-hmm. Some folks will even go as far as to say, Doc, that it's like, if you give us a dispensary, this should be a part of our reparations talk. Right. I don't know if that's going too far or not, but the point is that black folks, and particularly black men in here in LA, there are a lot of black women cannabis dispensaries that are popping up all around the city. For us to get involved, to get a piece of the pie, talk to us like, how will this rescheduling affect that? Do you think that, as Benny mentioned, that it will make it harder, more regulations, the fees will go up? How will this situation affect the our interest into the industry?
Well, I think when this happens, they'll start treating cannabis more like alcohol regulation. There may be, I think the problem here is that we were sold this idea of social equity, that we were most hurt by the war on drugs, and so we've been given some ability to get into this space sometimes a little bit easier, but the numbers are still always really high when it comes to the dollars that are needed to get there. Okay, so sometimes we get first access to applications, but the money still has to come, right? And the fact of the matter is, we saw this, and initially I believed as well, this was an opportunity for generational wealth. And I think for some, it's possible. I think when you got into it, how you run your business, how you take care of this aspect, just like any other business, but it's not the golden brick road of prosperity that I think so many people believed it would be. Mainly because of the regulations that are involved, mainly because you take a state like Michigan and their illegal market is as active as some dispensaries have had to close because of the illegal market is so rampant there. So, I always thought when dispensaries opened that, your weed man went out of business. But not at all the case, because number one, the cost is higher typically in dispensaries. Again, sometimes we don't really want to taste dispensaries, though you have to be careful because we're concerned about fentanyl and other things being laced in cannabis, and so we're concerned about safety when it comes off of the street. Your cousin or your friend might be great, but where did he get it from? Right?
He don't know. He don't know that.
Exactly. Right.
He don't know. He in the street. He's just trying to move the product, right? He's not asking for the ingredients and like, oh, what's your process? I can't provide that to my customers. Like he don't know. He really doesn't care, to be honest.
Absolutely. I think the nice thing about dispensaries is that, particularly from a medical point of view, you have these options of what you can choose from. So you can specifically get things that are better for daytime, better for nighttime, sleep, anxiety, pain, and all of the processed options like tinctures where they, extract everything from the plant and recombine it in different concentrations to help with different conditions. That is what I think is beneficial about the dispensaries. However, it's not necessarily, the green wave that we were hoping.
Oh, no, it's not. Not at all. Not at all. And Benny, you said, to add to your point, you said, hell yeah, Farajii, my man, hell yeah, because it's a new industry, easy to focus on and make direct correlation to our personal race war, drug war. Send that money to us, enough of us on census to collect on.
I do think that there should be, I know they tried to do this whole social equity thing, but I do think cannabis, this was medicine for us. Even when you read about cannabis history, they leave out Africa entirely. They say it's only, in Asia that cannabis came from. Like, we're cut out of history, even when we look at this. But this was medicine for us. And I think if we approach this in a way, this can be ours again. It should be ours again. But it really depends on how we approach this. I'm very big on not just changing the stigma, but for Black people to own and understand how they use it in a responsible way and respect it, because we've been taught to not respect it. We get what we get and we use what we have. But there's an opportunity in the cannabis space to really respect the plant, see what it can do for you, get you off of some of those pharmaceuticals, and actually be a lot healthier if we respect it appropriately.
We gotta. So it's essentially, Doc, that we gotta go into this with our eyes wide open.
100%.
And I know when I was like, well, Doc, I think we should talk about this. You were like, I'm trying to get out this industry.
You know what it is? I see the writing on the wall. I
Okay.
have an incredible.
Come on, now you're gonna have to be the great prophet that's going to help us to understand what's coming down the pike here, Doc.
Absolutely. I see the writing on the wall, and I know that I need to be aware that the medical aspect of this, though it should be maintained, state after state, as a state goes recreational, the medicinal aspects start to disappear. The stories disappear. That's part of the reason I did Courage in Cannabis, because I wanted to document the stories of how it helps people in business, health, wellness, caregivers, educate. I wanted these stories to be documented. But I do know that when the pharmaceutical companies come down the pipeline, what I do will not be as respected, and it's questionable how respected it is now. And so I have a great affinity for my cannabis patients and helping them get off of medications, helping them use this and being able to put their health back into their own hands. And cannabis gives you that ability when you understand how to use it appropriately. So I don't think I'll ever be out of this space, but I do need to evolve as the industry evolves as well.
Absolutely. There's one other piece about the economics I think we need to bring up, which is how there is mention that there is a bipartisan effort in Congress that, according to NBC, that would make it easier for financial institutions to offer banking services to legal cannabis companies. Chuck Schumer said that getting the legislation known as the Safe Banking Act across the finish line will be a top priority when the Senate returns in September.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about that, if you can, Doc.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been on some town hall boards talking to some of the state and U.S. senators about the Safe Banking Act and what happens when businesses can't get proper banking, when their credit card processing is denied over and over again. It basically, this is considered a red light or red flagged business. And so to be able to process things online, being able to open account, I'm in the CBD space. And I've had multiple bank accounts closed. I've had some of my authors had their PayPal taken because they were selling a book called Courage in Cannabis. It does not allow for businesses to operate in a reasonable way because it's considered a red flag business. And to be able to get a loan to run, those options just don't really exist because of how they're looking at this. So taking it off of Schedule 1, getting it down to Schedule 3, and getting that Safe Banking Act approved, it'll be good for everybody because, again, money runs this, right? And so if businesses can run their businesses better and make more money, then this is something that should have been done a long time ago.
Absolutely. Marlon, you checked in. Marlon Miller, you said, Farajii, don't you think that the people that care about the benefits will continue to care even when Big Pharma takes over?
The people,
I don't know.
The medical benefits?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I feel like Marlon and Doc, that once Big Pharma takes over, it changes the whole landscape. It's going to change the whole landscape. It's going to reprioritize. It's going to cause many people to reorient their goals in being a part of the industry, right? Because now Big Pharma is coming. They're going to come with being able to produce it at a higher quantity, sell it at a lower price, get it to customers at a quicker rate. I mean, everything changes if you have big pharmaceutical companies coming into the industry, right? Like right now, we're still feeling like just like a network of mom and pop shops. Not always, but a network. But now, if you're talking about bringing these multi-million-dollar global corporations into the space, it changes everything.
It does. I do think this is what happens currently, that a state is medicinal and the processors, the cultivators have medicinal cannabis licenses. They produce a fair amount of not just CBD, but other cannabinoids, CBG, other products that have a lot of more medical benefits than causing the high that you get from THC. And of course, they produce a number of things that obviously also have the THC in it as well. However, when a state goes recreational, many of them drop their medicinal licenses altogether, and then they're not even making or growing or producing the products that have these other cannabinoids.
Yeah.
So, but the patient that got the card in the first place still exists. So they no longer have access to the CBD and CBG and these other products that are, creams, topicals, things that are more medicinal minded.
Yeah.
And they end up getting, either they back out altogether, they get kind of woven into the recreational scene. And so the patient that was using some CBD products now is only using a lot of high THC products because that's all that there is, right? So in reality, I think big pharma coming in might put another medical spotlight on this. I'm hoping, because they're not going to make a whole lot of high THC products. They're going to take the research and they're going to make the products that have the highest medicinal qualities to it. So I think the medical patient might possibly do better, and that the recreational patient, the recreational user, who often needs more medicinal attention as it is. A lot of people use it, they think it's recreational, and they actually have other issues that they're not really dealing with directly. They will get kind of isolated. I've said to you once before that I'm always concerned that when big pharma comes in, I think cannabis, if we're not careful, will become the new malt liquor, the new 5 of our neighborhoods. That they're going to push the really high THC and they're going to say, oh, you like this? Hey, take more of it. And it'll be, and if we're not careful, if we're not aware, if we're not savvy, we'll take it down. And though, going back to our original statement, even though addiction isn't a huge aspect of cannabis, it can be distracting for some. It can be a way to avoid other issues in their life. Yep. And that bothers me. I worry about that because, again, I want to be on the right. I started my career at the top of the opioid epidemic, and I felt like I was on the wrong side of history with that. And I was told that if people have real pain, they'll never be addicted. And I'm always conscious that I'm not on the wrong side of history with this one. And so, if we don't maintain a voice in this space, they will take advantage of us. And they will numb us to the point where we think, oh, look at what we have. We have as much access as we want. But what are we doing with that access? And what's it doing to our families and our homes?
I'm going to leave it right there.
I'm sorry.
No. Do not apologize for telling us the truth. Because that is exactly my concern. Yeah. That is exactly my concern. That's why we have to have these conversations. And the way we have these conversations and with individuals who give a damn about the livelihoods of Black people and people in general. So I thank you for, expressing that, because that is a very real concern. I think not just for me or you, for a lot of our crew members, a lot of folks that this is all well and good until it gets to a point where we are, we are basically setting our own selves back, for whatever reason. So let's
make sure we use it properly. I will do the after chat tonight. I won't do it at 5:30 because I'm going to go to my daughter. It's Tuesday. So Tuesday's volleyball night. All right. So I'm going to go to my daughter's volleyball game, but I will get online on Instagram at Dr. Bridget MD after that. And it's always good to see you, Farajii.
It's always good to see you, Doc. Folks, make sure y'all follow Dr. Bridget on all social media platforms and make sure y'all check her out. She's in a lot of different spaces, having a lot of different conversations about cannabis. There she is. She has a website. Follow her, support her, and most importantly, we'll do our part here on The Culture to bring her back on so we can have more in-person and important conversations like this. Dr. Bridget MD, thank you for being so good for The Culture.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, I got something for you for Trends, Posts, and Doing the Most. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Very quickly, we wanted to let you know that a judge ordered the white man who the white man to stand trial and face charges in the shooting of the black teenager Ralph Yarl, who rang his doorbell after having gone to the wrong address. This is from NBC News. Andrew Lester, 84 years old. He's charged with first-degree assault and armed criminal action in the shooting on April 13th in Kansas City. His arraignment is set for September 20th. According to Clay County prosecuting attorney Zachary Thompson, he's saying Clay County justice happens inside the courtroom, as he talked to reporters after the judge sent the case to trial. Right now, Andrew Lester, who is free on bail, he was showing no emotions when this announcement came from the judge. But the prosecutor, when asked Ralph Yarl how he was doing when he testified, Yarl said better than, say, 4 months ago. And so he is still in recovery. Y'all remember that little brother Ralph Yarl rang the doorbell without any response for an extended amount of time. And then Andrew Lester came to the entrance, opened the door, and showed a gun and said to him, "Don't come here ever again." And then he was shot to the head, fell to the ground, and then shot again in the arm. And so it was a real blessing and miracle that he was not killed during that encounter. But we will see how justice plays out in the courtroom on September the 20th when Andrew Lester is charged. Is planning to go to that arraignment, and we will certainly keep you posted on that. All right, folks, I truly appreciate each and every one of you. I want to thank our very special guest, Dr. Bridget Brian Walsh from SoFi Bank. I want to thank all of you for joining us in the conversation. Make sure you do your due diligence. If you enjoyed the conversation, if you enjoyed how we've had these discussions, if you enjoyed this platform to bring your ideas, your thoughts, your comments into the discussions, go to do your due diligence. Support us here at Black Star Network, blackstarnetwork.com. You can go to our website, download the app for free. Put it on all your devices, but we certainly would love to get your financial support, as this is a movement, folks. This is a movement, and we want to give a big shout out to Karen Watts Dolan, who has supported, and she is officially a part of the Bring the Funk fan club at a level 1. Karen, thank you so much, and your support means everything to us. So do your due diligence, folks. Support us here at Black Star Network, and not just the show, the culture, but all of the other dope programs that we have here on the network. Also, follow us on social media at Black Star Network. And while you're there, follow me on social media. You can find me at The Real Farajii on Instagram, and I'm on at Farajii on Twitter, and you can find me on Threads and Facebook. But we would love to connect with you as we continue to build with this community. But folks, I want to thank each and every one of you. Thank you to all of our New Culture crew members that checked in for the day. And I kind of thank my production team. I want to thank Joel, Shannon, Maddie, Chris, and my man King Keenan for making us look and sound so good. Stay tuned. Up next at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is Roland Martin Unfiltered RMU. We are back on the air, bringing you live shows after the extended weekend. But we look forward for you to continue to support us here, and most importantly, continue to be informed by all the things that we're talking about that affects Black America. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow. Checking in with Suzette Speaks tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here, only here, exclusively here on the Black Star Network. Peace.